Oh, seriously, kids, night riding is the absolute best way to spend a couple of £100. Not even that, you can get a rideable light for well under £100 now. But if you can afford a helmet light as well, so you can look around the turns, even better.
Hey up, I'm Guy Keston, the Tester Man, and as you've just seen from that clip, I think night riding is bloody brilliant. Not because it's an outrageous amount of fun. In a world of riding that seems to be getting more and more serious, it's almost impossible not to just pee yourself laughing when you're gooning about in the woods or on the hills at night. There's just something fundamentally unserious about it. But also, it literally lets you buy more riding time, which has to be the ultimate upgrade, because it's dark when you go to work, it's dark when you come back from work. So unless you can ride on the weekends, you're knackered right now. So not only is it brilliant fun, but it's also brilliant value in terms of maximising how much you can use your bike. Not just in the winter either, but also in summer when you can, stay out later, you can ride overnight, do a solstice ride, do a 24-hour race, all those kind of things. But there is a huge amount of tech to talk about here. And I'm actually recording this intro having just finished the whole video because it took so damn long for me to chat through all the tech. I figured I'd better come back to the start and give you a warning. This is a long one. So now is the time to make yourself a cup of tea, fireworks are going off, make yourself a cup of tea, get some biscuits, get yourself comfy, and prepare to, either pay attention for a long time or just flick in and out of this, because it covers a whole load of different topics. But hopefully, by the end of it, you will be a lot wiser when it comes to being able to pick exactly the right light for the way you ride, for the bike you've got, and for the places you ride, and the budget you have. So, dig in for this one, and hopefully it'll be worth it, and then get ready for a whole range of reviews. I've got an absolute ton of them here, from the super spendy and super high tech, right through to fairly basic, really affordable setups. And I'll be testing those based on, and I've tested those in the light of my 30 years experience professionally testing lights, not only for magazines and websites, but also bike distributors before I even worked for magazines and websites. And before that, I was an avid night rider back in the late 80s, when that involved either running a Petzl head torch or strapping a broomstick across your bar ends and sticking a load of Ever-Readies on. If you started with BLTs and Night Suns, you have no idea how good you had it. But the great thing is now, you can get the tech that we were trying to do with car batteries and bits of plastic piping from Maplin and car head bulbs. You can get that in really affordable, super compact, very reliable setups for like I say, sub £100, and they're really, really good. But there is a huge amount to talk about in terms of tech and in terms of the technology and the sort of buzzwords behind lighting, and it can be really, really confusing. So, are you sitting comfortably? Well, let's begin. First up, how much power do you need? Well, to be honest, that depends where you ride, how you ride, and who you ride with. If you're just riding on your own, fairly, steady gravel tracks, nothing techie, and you're happy to dial back the speed, then you can probably get away with about 500 lumens. I mean, you can do that, if you're going up a steady climb or something like that, you can do that even on a mountain bike as well. For more spirited riding, you know, maybe riding you already know, but you still want to be able to see if there's a tree falling over or there's a badger standing in the middle of the track with enough warning to brake and take evasive badger action, then 1,000 lumens, I think, is a basic minimum for sort of general off-road riding. And then beyond that, the more light you have, the more you can see. I mean, that's a general statement, because as we'll see when we get into the lights test, not even just sort of some outputs aren't quite what they're claimed to be, but also the way lights deliver that light can also make a dramatic difference to how useful they are on the trail. But the more you go up above that, the more you can see, and the faster you can go, essentially. But I would say 1,000 lumens is your basic. Once you get up to sort of 2.5, you're going to be able to go pretty hard in most techie sections, especially if you can run a headlight and a bar light. We'll get back to that in a minute. But obviously, be sensible. Don't go crazy out there. Still ride within your limits, because you can't see as well. You haven't, things to happen at night out of the blue because you haven't got that full daylight vision. And perhaps more importantly, it's much harder for people to come and rescue you. Whether that's people just coming out and helping you get home if you break your bike, but also emergency services aren't going to be best pleased to be out in the middle of the night. Things like air ambulances can't always fly. It's much harder to find casualties at night. So again, don't go daft. Even a 12,000 lumen light can't save you from really bad decisions. And that's my parental advisory statement there. But I'd say 1,000 for a decent light. But if you can go up to 2,000, whether that's with 2,000 lumen lights, one on your head, one on the bars, or just 2,000 lumen. 2,500 lumen light in one hit that suits the way you ride, in terms of flood or spot. Sorry, focus, Kestevan. Keep it in order. We'll do that later. That should be more than enough. And if you can only afford a 500 watt light, then absolutely fine. Just ride to the limits that gives you. Sorry, not 500 watt, 500 lumen light, then absolutely fine. Just ride to the limit that you've got. Just don't be daft is the bottom line. The only other thing I would say is, if you're riding with people with more powerful lights, if they're behind you, you're just going to get your shadow cast all the way down the trail like they're summoning Batman or something. So there is a bit of modification to make, and you can just let them go in front. But obviously, that's something to bear in mind. If you're riding with people lucky enough to have mega powerful lights, you might have to match them, or like I say, just trade your place in the train. So the next thing you need to talk about is runtime or battery capacity. So how long you can run the lights. In all the reviews, I will give you a runtime at maximum power. Now, that isn't just a claimed runtime, as you'll often see in reviews. That's an average runtime over 3 different runs of the lights in it's a simple rig. I just set them up on, I think I used a Matic handle this time round, and just put all the lights along it, have a fan blowing on them to replicate the airflow that you'll get while you're riding your bike, and just time them from the start to when they fizzle out. But also, critically, during that process, time when the warning lights come on, or time when the runtime indicators change, because it's all very well having a runtime indicator, but if it's not accurate, you need to know that. And also, again, if you've got a light with a sort of an emergency end warning, you want to know how long that light's for, how long that lasts. And if you've got like a sort of, flashing warning, you need to get home now, you need to know how long that lasts for. It's no use, like in some lights I've tested, it's literally 5 minutes. They go, emergency light. You've literally got 5 minutes before the thing goes dead. which is potentially really, really dangerous. Whereas on other lights, you've still got half an hour, even if the overall, light time is only like 2 hours. And also, obviously, nearly all lights, in fact, all of them, all the lights I've tested have different modes, so you can run them in different powers. So obviously, if you've got a 2000 lumen light that lasts for an hour, then if you put it in the 1000 lumen mode, it's going to last for 2 hours. And if you're kind of switching between the two, that's where having a light indicator on top of it really helps. And the more accurate the light indicator is and the more detail that gives you, the more you can kind of ration those run times. So you go, right, most of the time I'm going to be going uphill, I only need, say, 500 lumens. And that obviously gives you, going back to the previous example, that could give you 4 hours run time. But if you're using that 2000 lumens for the descents, that's going to burn through it quicker. So there's quite a lot of mental arithmetic there if you only got like a basic traffic light thing on top of your lights. And but yeah, generally, going back to the original point, get more battery life than you'll think you'll need. Because not only will batteries kind of degrade over age, so you'll eventually get less runtime than you originally did, but also just things like the light being cold, or conditions around the light being cold, that can really eat into battery life. Plus, you never know when you might need that extra power. If you do have a mechanical, if somebody else you're riding with has an issue, you want to have that buffer zone to make sure that you can get off the hill safely, get home safely, rather than going, uh-oh, I've got no light left here. And that's a real problem. But also, one feature we're seeing in more and more lights now, which is really, really useful, is what they call pass-through charging. So you can attach the light to a power pack, which obviously, means that you're boosted by as much as the milliamp hours you've got in your battery. And it's certainly quite common now with USB-C lights, but watch out for whether that compromises the waterproofing, because generally you have to pull open a rubber flap and stick the cable in there, and that rubber flap is part of the waterproofing. And again, different lights, different waterproof ratings. And there's even some I've got on test where most of the light has got a really, really high, like IPX7, IPX8 waterproof rating, but the remote control's only IPX4. So, again, just kind of work out all the different variations. Like I said, there's a lot of tech going on, but I kind of wanted to give you a grounding before we move into those individual reviews. So what have I said on battery life? Basically, make sure you're working off actual run times, so trusted reviews, and give yourself some extra. And if you think you might need more, if you think, well, I might do an overnighter all summer, or I might want to, or a big long night ride, then get a light that you can boost with an extra battery. Or, I think this is the only light on test, this little Phoenix light. Why more lights don't let you do this, I don't know. You can just replace, that's a very easy to find, it's 21700 battery, which is a super common lithium ion battery. You can just unscrew it, pop that in, you can carry as many of those as you want. And so you've almost got sort of limitless runtime on that light. And it's kind of ironic that this is a light that isn't really from the bike industry. It's kind of it's closer to being, well, certainly its ancestors are basically just modified torches. I mean, that is now a bike light with its own bike mount now. But obviously, if that appeals to you, then look out for that Phoenix review. Right, so next thing you want to bear in mind is how you're going to fit it to your bike. So just simple things like, what size is your handlebar? Does the handlebar bracket work for that size of handlebar? Or if you're one of these fancy folks who's got an all-in-one carbon bar, then you'll need something like a rubber strap system that kind of just can mold to any shape, which is, where that Lesign comes in dead handy. That's why I've used that a lot. Or, the same on this Moonlight there. Because something like that, that's only going to work with a round bar. But on the other hand, the advantage here with this is offset. So when that is to one side of your bar, the light sits directly in front of your stem. And also just the way the light actually mounts is quite important. So this has like a Garmin bayonet twist style on it. So it'll mount to any kind of Garmin mount. Other lights use a GoPro mount, the classic 3-slot job, which again you can get loads of different mounts for. There's even stem mounts for those, which keeps things nice and tidy. Whereas other lights use a very specific, it only works for them. And in some cases, that's the real Achilles heel of the design. Because, not only is it only works for that, but if that gets damaged or if that shoe becomes loose, and come on, let's be honest, that is the biggest flaw in my view with exposure lights. Great lights generally, spendy, but with a bunch of tech and absolutely great backup from the after sales, including like event support and stuff like that. But that bracket, not only will it only fit on round bars, again, you can get class. It generally doesn't do that on the trail, but then again, that little shoe can unscrew, so it's not invulnerable, but then you can actually get different adapter mounts for these USE things as well. So it's looking at the whole package and whether that will work for you, and also whether you want a bar light or a helmet mount. Because obviously bar lights are great because you can run a bigger system. Well, that's not really a great example. Let's go back to that exposure. And bar lights are great because you can run a heavier light. This is only the race light. They do the Max D and the 6-pack, which is about double the size of that. And it's just, sat on your bars, and obviously you can get away with a heavier light that way, but it's only ever going to point where your handlebars are pointing. And that might not be where you're pointing or even where you're looking next. And also, because it's lower than your eye level, what it tends to do is just you don't get any infill on depressions in the trail. So if there's a bump, you can't see beyond that bump. The actual ground is just a black pool. So it could be a really, really big dip, or it could be a very, very shallow dip, or, Lord knows what's hiding in that hole. If it's a trail, even if it's a trail you rode earlier that day, don't assume that like a stick hasn't fallen over, or as I said at the start, there isn't that badger lurking to ambush you. Whereas a helmet light, you can basically, it's on your head. So wherever you look, the light looks as well. But the downside with that is because it's on a line with your eye line, yes, that can see behind those dips and lumps, but it's very, very hard to get depth perception because you're not getting that kind of triangulation from the bar to where your eye is. So sometimes you can not even see like a ditch, or you might not even see that roller because you don't get that shadow behind it. So ideally, you really want to have both, because not only does that give you sort of a more it gives you both triangulations in terms of what your eyes can work from, but also it means you can look where you want. You can generally run a smaller or more focused helmet light because that way you can have a lightweight system on your head, and because you're looking where you're looking, you don't need like a broad flood beam. But also having two lights means if you have an issue with one light, then you've also automatically got a backup to get you home with. And that leads on to, I've already kind of slightly touched on it, whether you should go for a flood or a spot. And that leads directly on to whether you should go for a floodlight or a spotlight. Spotlight, very focused, sort of pencil beam. You'll generally be able to see a lot further down the trail for a given output with a spotlight, because it is like a proper searchlight beam. So if you're just running less technical trails, if you're on gravel and you just want to be able to see a long way ahead, or you're running very fast, or you're riding very fast, then spot beam makes a lot of sense. But because there's a real fall off to either side. Even if you're using it on a helmet light, it's quite tiring because you're really having to deal with an edge all the time, and things are flicking in and out of that edge, which until your eyes are having to refocus a lot of the time, and that's what really start to make your eyes tired quite quickly on a ride. And plus, if you're on twisty turny trails, fine if it's on your helmet light, but if it's on your bars, then you're just not going to get any of that kind of peripheral vision that you, and when you lose it, you'll be amazed how much you rely on it. You know, whether it's just spotting the next turning or knowing where the turn goes, or whether it goes up or whether it goes down. It's just things like, you know, has it gone from like open moorland to woodland? Is there suddenly a load of rocks at the side? Because if there's rocks at the side, there's probably going to be rocks at the trail. Has it got to a marsh on the side? Because if that's wet, then trail's likely to be wet. All of these things that have a really important role in building up your picture of the trail, they're suddenly not available to you anymore. So, you know, you might want to go for a flood beam where you've got, I mean, again, it varies. It's sometimes done with where you sit the LEDs. It's sometimes done with the optic in front of them or the reflectors behind them. I'll cover all that in the individual views, reviews for each light. But, you know, so in the case of this Magic Shine, you can run it, I'll try not to blind you, but you can run it in a flood beam like that, so that gives loads of width, loads of spread. You can see, you know, everything that's going on around you. It kind of compensates for the fact that your bars might not be pointing in the right direction. But also, you can run it in a spot beam as well. So that's your more focused option. Or for full power, let's get it right, you can run it in both. So, you know, that's your max power there. So you've got both the reach and you've got the flood beam, which is best of both worlds, but you're only going to get that on sort of more advanced, more expensive lights. So what I would generally say is broad beam floodlight on the bars, and then spotlight on the head if you have to go for one or the other. But be aware that even with flood beams, it's not always a consistent spread of light. Often you'll get like quite a focused center, and then it'll spread off to the sides. But again, if it's a really sharp edge to that spread, or even just a sharp edge between the centre beam and the peripheral beam, then again, that's going to be quite tiring as the objects transfer from the different parts of the beam, and some have really weird holes in them, or just, you know, a really weird diffraction used on the lens. You know, some of them you can go, oh right, well it's got a high or a low beam, and it's just like, one of them's just absolutely rubbish. You know, it's such a kind of distorted view of the trail that you're better off, you know, that it's actually really confusing, because trails are confusing enough to read at night. You know, it's not like riding on the road where you go, it's tarmac, it's probably going to be relatively smooth. You've got things like, you know, totally different textures which you rely on for traction and grip and judging speed, where braking, or just not hitting a big rock and smashing your teeth out. So good clean optics, and again, using lights that give a really good accurate rendering of the trail are the best kind of lights to go for. So obviously those are the ones that be getting a good thumbs up in those reviews. And the other thing that you can talk about is what you call color temperature. And the best way I can kind of give you an example of that is this ring light that I'm using, #influencer. At the moment it's in quite a warm temperature, which is more natural light, and you can see I can go to a bluey light like that, or a whiter light like that, and then we go back to that warmer temperature. And while those bluey lights and the whiter lights look more powerful, you know, because you've got that dazzle, like, you know, pow, like metal like halide lights on cars, you're like, wow, that's really bright. What you'll find is, if you get into a really highly reflective situation like a wet trail, wet leaves or anything like that, that dazzle, or even fog, that dazzle is going to come right back at you, and again, really tiring on your eyes. Whereas a warmer colour is not going to be so abrupt, and you're going to be able to ride with it longer and probably be able to read the terrain better. even if it seems dimmer in the first place, you're probably going to get better overall vision from a warmer colour temperature coming out of those LEDs. And again, that's something I'll cover in the reviews. So the next thing to talk about, we kind of, discussed runtime, we've discussed power, we've discussed making sure the bike light actually fits on your bike or the helmet. Again, so I actually didn't really talk about that. Obviously, different helmets have very different sort of vent structures. So make sure that the light you're choosing or the helmet bracket you're using actually fits with your helmet. This is great because it's got a central hole and I can put this exposure sort of single point mount straight in there. But if it doesn't have a central hole, then it's got to be off to one side. And in the same way, if you've got straps that go inside the helmet, you want to make sure it doesn't get in the way of any MIPS cradles in the inside there, or that the holes aren't so far away the whole thing just shuffles about again. Because that's another thing I didn't talk about, is security of the mount. Because while I said, in this instance, the design is really, really good from a sort of multi-instant fit. Sometimes because it's just a stretchy band, there are situations where it's a rubber mount and it will start to wiggle a little bit, and again that'll create distortion in what you're seeing. But is it better to have a light that kind of takes a bit of a hit? If you crash with that on, it's just going to move around the bars, whereas if you crash with that on, you're quite likely, because that's a hard metal clamp, you're either quite likely to snap the bracket, which is actually better than snapping the bars. But for example, I think the last 4 night rides I've done with my mates using exposure lights, they've all involved crashes where exposure lights brackets have come off worse, and they've either had to be bent back into shape, or they've just been ruined. So they've had to just run on helmet lights after that. So again, there's a lot to think about with mounts as well. But as a general rule, I'd always say go for simple and reliable, even if that means a slight drop off in performance, rather than something super complex that might give you grief or might break or something like that. And that absolutely applies to tech as well, because you can get all sorts now. You can get remote controls, you can get Bluetooth apps that let you tune the different settings. You can something like the exposure, there we go, that has a display on the back. It gives you percentage run times. It changes depending what mode you're in as well. You can even change the presets of the light manually when you turn it on. It has a feature, a lot of the USE exposure lights, being old school calling it USE, not exposure. A lot of the exposure lights have an inbuilt accelerometer, so you can set it up to go dimmer when you're not moving as fast and things like that. Great tech, but with each of those elements, there's issues that might not work as you want. I mean, for example, on that, it's really good having that display, and it is better than the old displays, which are harder to read, but you've still got to be able to see the back of the light as you're running it, whereas maybe a simpler display on top of the light would actually be easier to read. And again, it just depends how you use your light. In the same way as I'm a big fan of remotes, because our night rides tend to be full on frantic race affairs where we're not stopping at all between going up a climb and descending, or into and out of stuff, and we ride for a relatively long time, so most of us are switching modes as well. So a remote works really, really well there. But if you're happy either stopping at the top of a climb and putting into, a higher power mode manually for the descent, then you're not going to be as bothered by that. Or if you've got plenty of runtime, then you don't need detailed runtime feedback. And so, or if you just want, dead basic, something like design, it's just a traffic light system. It's a green when you've got full power, and then it's gradually just goes to orange and then red. Whereas something like, again, I've showed you it on the it's the only trouble with lights. I'm holding it the wrong way up, that's why I'm pressing the wrong button. Whereas the Raven lights have a full sort of little LCD display screen on the top. So, and they're generally pretty accurate as well. But again, calibrate your own lights as well. I'll do a whole feature on how to make the best use of whatever lights you've got as a separate thing, because there are some absolute howlers in how some people set up their lighting rigs, which I think is worth talking about separately. But just, it's always easy to kind of overbuy on tech. And even something like having a light that you forget the turning on sequence, it needs to be a specific timing on the double click or something like that, can be an absolute arse, especially if it's cold, it's dark, it's the end of a long day already, and you just want to get out and ride. And again, knowing, sorry, that was my stomach, I haven't eaten yet, knowing where you are in the recharge cycle as well, knowing how fast a light can recharge, because some lights are great, but they take all day to recharge, even for relatively small batteries, whereas others, you can have them up to like 75% ready to go in under an hour. So again, those are all things that will be part of the reviews I'm doing on these lights, but they're all things you need to think about when you're actually choosing your lights. And also, amount of modes is a big one. I mean, some lights, you can just, like this Lazine, you can have it in multiple modes, including flashing modes, or sort of fluctuating strobe modes there, which is great for riding in traffic. But also, the great thing about this light is you can also just set it into a two-step mode. So you can just have it in high mode. I can't remember. Again, this is the trouble with testing so many lights. I can't always remember what the specific sequence is. But yeah, I mean, you can set it so it's just got a high and low mode, which, is great, because the last thing you want, especially if you haven't got a remote, is to be like pressing the button really, really hard to get through like 4 strobe modes and then 3 low power modes to get back to high power. If you're, suddenly tipping off the edge of a technical descent, the last thing you want to do is accidentally hit strobe mode, because that's going to end really, really badly. The next strobe you're going to see is likely going to be an ambulance light. But also just things like, being able to find the switch. I mean, that's a cold night number, that, isn't it, in terms of nipples? But it's dead easy to find with a winter glove. But, if you've got a light with a proud button on it that turns on the light really, really easily, then that could be a nightmare if you set it off in your bag while you're traveling. Whereas other lights, if you haven't got a remote but you can't find the button because it's not backlit or because it's not very well, it's not easy to feel on the light unit, then that's a real fight if you need to change modes at the same time. So again, there's just a ton of stuff to think about, even on that really, really small practical level. And again, it all basically goes back to how you're going to use that light. If you are going to use it for commuting as well, then having a flash mode is brilliant. But if you're not, then you want more of a pure off-road light, then, go for that. Again, just, make your own decisions on this, but be aware that there's loads and loads of options to go at. And the other thing that you will find is not only will more tech generally put a bigger battery drain on, so for the same size battery or the same weight of light, you'll get less runtime on a more complicated light than you will on a simpler light. But generally, I mean, I don't know, it's a bit of a generalization, but often the more tech you have, the more issues there are to go wrong with it. Even if it's just, you get annoyed messing about with an app, or your remote doesn't connect that night and stuff like that. It's just another thing. So like get in the way of just getting out on your bike and having a good time compared to just a press and go light. And also more tech will generally mean a more expensive light. Not always. There are some real bargains that have a really high level of tech for a really, competitive price. But generally, the more tech you have, that increases the price. So again, you're moving away from that basic, how much power and runtime am I getting for a given cost? And again, like I say, that's obviously something you've got to afford these lights. But at the end of the day, remember, in terms of how much riding they can give you and top quality fun riding, then I think, spending a decent amount on lights is a really, really good investment. But, don't necessarily, if you're not convinced, either try and borrow a set. You'll often find, I know Exposure are doing a demo tour at the moment where you can go and like try lights out at your local bike shop or something like that. At Dale's Bike Centre we're doing one last week, and I know other places are doing it where you can just go down there and just go, all right, I'd like to try this range of lights. They'll do it at events as well. I know they did it at the X Enduro. They had a night, you know, we had a night stages at the X Enduro, and you know, that's great. Or your local bike shop might have loaner sets, and you can go, actually, yeah, I really like this. This is ace. I want to properly invest in a decent lighting setup. Or you might go, well, this is horrible. It doesn't really suit, you know, it doesn't suit the riding I'm doing. I don't like it. I've watched too many horror movies. I get too spooked. Or you're just all bloody idiots. This is dangerous. This is stupid. I'm not into it. So, you know, don't waste hundreds of pounds on a lighting setup without trying it first. And also bear in mind that if you just buy a basic light straight away, then it's not like you can't use that as well. You know, if you buy a little torch light, that can go on your head when you get a more powerful bar light. Or even if you've got two little torch lights, you know, if you can only afford, say, another 100 quid, you can't afford like the mega 300 quid light, just use both of them together. Because again, you've got that really good stereoscopic effect, you know, of having two lights on your bars. You can run one and then run the other, which obviously doubles your run time, or run them both together when you need the extra light, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, sometimes you get a better light from having two, say, 1,000 lumen lights slightly spaced apart, because it's more like, you know, your binocular view, and you get some light coming from that side, some light coming from that side, so the shadows work really well to give you that 3D perception, compared to having 2,000 lights, or even 2,000 lumens, or even 3,000 lumens straight down the barrel of the trail, where it's all just bouncing back at you from one object. So again, you know, don't think a little light isn't really useful. And even if you do get the big rig, it's always worth having a little pocket light or a helmet light, not only for, you know, if you have a problem with your big lighting rig, but also just for trailside maintenance. You know, something that you can pick up and go, right, okay, you know, I can shine at the mech while I'm using it. You know, the big lights are at the front of the bike, they're no use, are they? And again, that's actually where helmet lights can be really super useful. So again, you know, just be aware of all those different effects before you spend. And the final thing, and it's a massively important part of the reviews, nearly all the lights I've reviewed, I've run for at least a year, or I know people who've run the lights for at least a year. In some cases, I haven't been able to do that because literally they've only changed the tech recently, like USE have made. Exposure have made some big changes to the lights. They've gone to USB-C on the back. They've changed the OLED display as well. So there's a lot of new tech in those, and they were literally only launched a couple of months ago. So I've used these lights. Dear Lord, you know, I've been talking a lot of hot air when even the GoPro overheats and stops recording, but that probably means it's definitely time to wrap up. So again, just to reiterate that point on reliability, you know, as we've shown there, you can't go far if your equipment runs out of life. And again, that's, I mean, the good news is lights are far more reliable than they ever were, but try and pick a light that's reliable, but also a light with good backup. So yes, it's super tempting to get something direct off Temu, off AliExpress or something like that, and there's some great bargains out there for sure. But even if you're buying something like, you know, lights from the Far East, like a Magic Shine or a Phoenix or something like that, you know, make sure you get them from the UK distributor so they can sort out any issues, you know, quickly and effectively. And just go for, you know, go look for lights. I mean, I'll try and cover it in the reviews. And actually what would be brilliant is if you guys could, I mean, I know straight away loads of people who run Exposure is going to be straight on there going, yeah, Exposure are absolutely brilliant. They've always looked after me with my lights. And that's, you know, that's great. That's because they are pricier, Exposure lights, but if you're getting sort of a guaranteed return, you know, repair service as quick as possible, then that obviously adds massively to the value. So if you guys, but you know, so Exposure I think is a given in terms of excellent after sales service. But if you guys could let me know how you've got on with other lights, in the comments below, that'll help inform anyone else watching this. And it also means I can go back to manufacturers before I record the videos and go, right, I've heard some people have said they've had this issue, and the manufacturer can go. I mean, there's an example here is Magic Shine. A lot of people, I commented about a couple of weeks ago about Magic Shine light, and I was like, oh, I had real problems with the wiring on mine. And so I went to Magic Shine UK and went, bit of an issue with the wiring apparently. They were like, okay, yeah. There was a design flaw really, but also if you wrap the cable too much around the stem or around the frame, because it's a in this instance it was a separate setup, then that can actually crack the wiring in them. But the latest versions have hopefully resolved that. So, again, the more information you can throw at me, I can throw out to manufacturers, and we end up with better reviews in the end. But I've just realised I didn't even talk about separates and separates where, I mean, you get the battery and you get the light in two places. Because obviously, advantage here is... it's all going to shit now. The advantage here is, that goes on the bars, that goes low down on the bike, or it goes on the helmet, that goes in your pack. Really, much more theoretically versatile in how you can use it. And the light is, on your frame rather than on the bars. So that's less vulnerable to falling off or straining the bracket or something like that. But, like I say, you've got that cable to deal with, and, strapping it on, they might not always fit on the frame and stuff like that. So going with a self-contained unit can actually be more convenient and neater and easy to set up. But once you go to higher power, you are putting a lot of strain and on that bracket, and also a lot of weight just on the bars, and you can't use that on your helmet unless you've got a neck like Rob Ross got from Santa Cruz. Industry in joke there. So reliability and backup, I would say, is the most, even though we've gone through all that tech, probably over 40 minutes of me waffling on about light tech now, at the end of the day, reliability is absolutely crucial. Not only because you might lose a night ride if your light doesn't turn on when you start the ride, but if you're out in the middle of nowhere and your light suddenly dies, then that could get genuinely dangerous, especially in winter, especially if the weather's bad. You're not only putting yourself in danger, potentially putting other people in danger, whether that's your mates you're riding with or people coming out to rescue you. So that will be a major focus of all the reviews. As I always say, get busy in the comments with your feedback, any questions you still have, because I won't have covered everything somehow, even in all this time. Please feel welcome to get in there and ask for more. I might refer you onto individual reviews, but that's fine. Like I say, they'll be up hopefully within a maximum a week, because it's already been too late. I should have had this out when the clocks changed, maybe even before. So I'm already dragging it out. So thanks for your patience on that one. But for now, I've been Gary Kestevan on Guy Case TV, talking about how to choose your perfect lights for opening up a whole new fabulous world of After Dark adventure. Finally a bit of the video that actually kind of sounded professional and concise. Thanks for your patience, folks. I used to have to wait for full moons to go night riding, but with all this extra knowledge, I'm all right now.